Greetings, Raise community. Brent coming in live with today's guest, Cheryl Webster Crounse, who currently serves as the Vice President of Advancement and Executive Director of the Salem State University Foundation. Welcome, Cheryl.
Thank you. Happy to be here with you, Brent.
Well, you are in the midst of kicking off a campaign that I'm going to guess is called Meet the Moment, and also recently had a giving day. And so this is going to be a reprieve from all of those activities. And we're just going to go for a little walk down memory lane while saving time to talk about the future as well. I love hearing about the higher education journey of our guests. And so why don't you take me back to junior year of high school? Who was that Cheryl? What was she into? And what led her to State University of New York at Oswego?
Yeah, so I was, what you probably don't know is I was a phone-a-thon caller for 5 semesters in a row, and I was top caller all 5 semesters. So I like to say fundraising started in college for me, if you can believe that.
But what led you to college? And
Sure.
At what point did you even learn what a phone-a-thon caller might be?
Yeah, so I kind of fell into that. But actually, I am first generation college student. So from a very young age, I was told I was going to college. I didn't really have a choice. But I was also one of those people that paid for their own college. So college for me was truly a transformation, I think. And partly why I think I resonate so much with the Salem State University mission. Our students are very similar to kind of my experience. But, I had a very humble upbringing, farm country, was a top in my class. This will be funny. Was the top third in my class, but there were only 40 students. So, being third in the class of 40 is not really all that much of an accomplishment. But, I was involved in everything. And I think that kind of bled into college. I was involved in as much as I could be while I was in college. I tried to get as much as I could out of the experience, and knowing, number one, that I was paying for it, and two, I knew that it was probably the last opportunity that I'd have to be amongst peers, such a large group of peers, to have so much fun and to really get the most out of college. So, I like to say I went to college to, get experience and to grow. But I never left college. I still work for a college. So
You've literally never left college.
Literally never left college. And I still love the college environment and the learning that happens and the work that we do.
So tell me a little bit more about your first gen experience. And as a reminder, I graduated from a public high school in rural Iowa with 67 kids. So rarely do I get to host guests who have a smaller graduating public high school class than me, but also was first gen, and absolutely that drives why I'm doing what I'm doing today. But just tell me more about that first gen experience, and both why you were pushed to go to college, which is a huge positive influence for first gen students, and then ultimately what stood out during that kind of adjustment period.
I think my parents, though they didn't get a college degree, valued and saw what a college degree could do for you. And in terms of advancing your life and social mobility and all that. So they were extremely supportive of the process of getting there and getting good grades. That was really important in our household. I think there was a huge adjustment period for me when I got to college. I grew up, my mom was a stay-at-home mom. And so I wouldn't say I was sheltered, but I definitely had a very supportive environment. And so when I got to college and I was alone and there wasn't that support system there, I was challenged. My first 2 semesters were pretty challenging from an academic perspective. First of all, I need to study to get good grades. I'm not one of those students that can just get good grades to get good grades. And so all of a sudden I find myself with all this free time, and what do I do with it? So time management wasn't really something I learned in high school, only because I was so programmed. I had, sports, I had my involvement. So I was so programmed. So actually that's why I sought out a job. I wanted some structure, beyond the classroom and the socialization, to have something that I could spend my time, so that I had limited time to study. So that forced me to actually study in the time that I had. So, I really, that phonathon job that I found the flyer for, and honestly, it was the highest paying job on campus. That's why I went for it.
Do you recall what kind of cash you were bringing in there? What the hourly
I think it was probably like $8 or something. I mean, it was pretty small, but it was the largest paying job on campus at that time. And there were bonuses associated with success. So if you were the top caller, you got a cash bonus. So of course I was driven to get those cash bonuses too, because I'm paying for my education. That means food and everything. So I was really driven to make as much as I could, and that phonathon job really did provide that.
I'm going to kind of skip ahead, but what you just said, it resonates so much. I was driven to hit that cash bonus, which we're happy to do for students. What about gift officers?
Yeah, I'm pleased to say I'm probably the first in the state university system that we just got approved with our foundation board to provide a financial award when we hit the $50 million mark and the $75 million mark. And actually, we're not just doing it for gift officers, we're doing it for the entire advancement team. Okay. Because I realize the value in retaining the talent in reaching our goals. And so we believe in team shared success.
Why, and this is not just a you thing, but like, why was it completely okay for a student caller to get a cash bonus in 1996, and in 2023, we're advocating to the board to basically just treat the rest of the staff the way that student callers have always been treated? Like, where is the philosophical disconnect?
Well, I think for us at Salem State, it was never really, I don't think the board, first of all, they weren't resistant at all. They realize how important it is. And I just don't think there was a culture of it. I honestly don't think it was an intentional leave out in any way. I just don't think there was a culture of it. And we're a nonprofit, right? That word nonprofit, I think lends itself to the idea that we can't compensate people for the good work they're doing. And I actually don't necessarily agree with that. I think we'll thrive if we actually recognize and support the talent as best we can. There are limitations for that for me at Salem State. Obviously, we're in a state environment, and our salaries are measured across, the system as well as within the institution. So sometimes I'm limited in what I can actually pay my employees. So we try to create the best culture we can so that they want to be a part of it. And then where I can advocate for things like, this financial incentive plan that we're about to roll out. So my goal is, if my team has and is in the best environment possible internally, they're going to treat our donors the best. And we want to have the best donor experience in the state of Massachusetts. That's our goal. So
you know how I feel about that topic. So, all right, well, take me back to your own student calling experience. What made you the best student caller? Like, did it click right away? Was there something innate about how you'd been raised, or was there, was it just that cash carrot that was driving it? I mean, tell me more about it.
Well, my mom, I think I said she was a stay-at-home mom, but she did a lot for the community. She was and was the head of all the fundraisers in West Valley, New York. And so, I think I, by virtue of proximity, learned a lot from her. And she probably would laugh hearing that. But, she was doing the sub runs for, band, and she was doing, raising money for, uniforms for sports. She was constantly raising money. And so I just saw what she was doing, I think. But I think probably some of it is in the nature of who I am. I love to connect with people. And I think that was what I was successful with on the phone, was connecting with people and helping to bring them back to campus, to their experience, and tying it to mine, and how preserving that for the future is important. So,
do any of those conversations stick with you, specifically or in general?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I'll never forget I was in a sorority. So, my favorite was calling sorority sisters, or even just other sororities, because, that was an easy one to connect with in terms of experience, and kind of walking down memory lane. There were a lot of really good stories that come out of those moments where you're, I don't know, honored to be the recipient of information someone's sharing with you, because it's part of what makes them proud to be an alum. And I think I carry that forward today in the conversations I have with Salem State alumni. They want their stories to be heard. They want to connect back to the place that they, hold fond memories. And that's often what we do when we're on the front lines connecting with alumni about the institution.
It does make you wonder why we don't do more kind of interest-based segmentation around, especially around student outreach. Why not just have you only call those sorority members if that was such a natural connection, and then align the fraternities with the representative today? And maybe some schools do that, but it just seems, where you could do it by degree or by where they grew up or their high school. And we have so many data points where it would likely just create that much more natural connection, but it feels like so often it's been a little round robin. And then when the roulette wheel hits sorority sister to sorority sister, it's like ding, 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 ding. But that's way more random than it should be, or maybe I'm wrong.
No, I mean, back in the 90s, we were on paper phonathon cards. So, you only were as good as the piece of paper you had in front of you. And sometimes you didn't even know.
What's paper? Tell me about
it. Right? Like, if it didn't even list that they were in a sorority, you had to discover that information.
Unreal.
So we've come a long way in that regard.
Now we know all of that. And I'm not convinced that we have so much more data. We have so much more ability to surface it, et cetera. But I'm not convinced that our use of it in ensuring that the Cheryl of today is connecting in the manner that would be so much more natural. No?
Yeah, I think sometimes we're limited by the technology and our ability to use the technology, because it's all about usability. If you can put everything in the system, but you have no ability to get it out, you're not going to be successful.
Well, somebody should start a company, work on that. We got some more to do for sure.
Everybody's working on that.
More to do, more to come. Okay, so basically, you never leave college then. So you get hooked, and then essentially immediately start at Harvard working in the annual fund, or in advancement at least. How did you think to go from student side hustle to career? And what led you to Cambridge?
Actually, a mentor, Mary Canali, who's still actually at Oswego. She's the head of fundraising now there. But at the time, she was the director of major gifts, and I wrote letters for her to send to donors as a student in the office. So I got pulled into sort of run and help with a golf classic. I helped, with major gift fundraising. I was kind of her student employee, if you will. So I was looking to apply for business jobs, sales and marketing, and using my business degree. And she goes, well, have you thought about fundraising? And I said, is that a career? I literally said, is that a career? She's like, that's what I do. And so she started pointing me to job opportunities. And I knew I wanted to move to a city because I didn't want to go back to the little town that I grew up in. So I actually applied to 3 different jobs, 3 different cities. And I said, the first call I get, I'm going to move to that city. And it was Harvard. Harvard called about 6 days after I left campus for an interview. And I said to my parents, I'm packing my car up. I'm headed out to Boston. I had some ties to the area because I was a nanny on the Cape. So I knew some people in Boston. So I did that and never sort of looked back. That was in 98. So I was lucky that phone call led to a job opportunity. I had one wonderful mentor, Greta Morgan, who's at Holy Cross now, She sort of took me under her wing and taught me everything she knew. In fact, when she went on maternity leave, I had the chance to take and run the annual giving department. And lucky for me, she took on another job at Harvard when she came back, and I was then promoted a couple of different times into what was eventually her role. I think it's people along the way that have really taken an interest in advancing my career, and she's one of them that I'm very fortunate with. The good thing about working at Harvard was I feel like I learned sort of the best from the best. And then from there went on to do great things for other institutions that perhaps needed a resource and someone that had more experience.
Most of our listeners haven't and won't work in advancement at Harvard. What are one or two or three things that if they could spend a few years working at Harvard, they might better appreciate either about what it means to be the best of the best or the sector in general, or maybe just Harvard specifically?
Harvard knows its story. It knows, its case. It knows its priorities. I always felt like when I was at the School of Education, we knew, what made us exceptional, and we knew how to talk about that. That was one of the things that I definitely took away was know your story, know how that will resonate with your alumni. And so I think Harvard was really good at telling stories. I also think they treat their donors very well, and they have an entirely tight peer network that I think most institutions are probably jealous of. There's this idea of that, you need to give, right? There's, you just know you need to give. That culture of giving that runs so rich and deep in their history, and how they intentionally built it over time. I think they resource their programs so that they're successful as well. And I think making sure you're advocating, I learned that advocating for the right resources was important to the success of, your fundraising operation. If you're not resourcing it appropriately, it's very hard to grow it.
Can I ask, you are now working at a very different institution with a different mission, a different focus, a different story. And it sounds like that it was easy to get behind the Harvard story and advocate for philanthropy at Harvard. And I know you feel that way at Salem State as well. But you see the next mega gift to Harvard, and without a doubt, there's going to be backlash. I really think it's one of the true bipartisan sort of experiences in our country right now, which is whether you're on the right or the left or in between, if Harvard gets a big gift, somebody's going to be upset about it. And how do you feel about that? Because you could very easily be the person that would say, that's crazy. If they had just given 50 million of that 500 million to Salem State, here's the transformational impact that it would have here. Harvard doesn't need it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But you've also worked at Harvard and made that pitch to Harvard donors. And so just tell me how you think about that aspect of philanthropy.
I think there's a place for a Harvard and a place for a Salem State. I think they're completely different missions. Harvard is solving some of the world's most challenging problems, and Salem State is educating a population that wouldn't have a place to go to college. So they're just two very different but important missions. Oh, you're on mute.
Not mutually exclusive, but I feel like that is the way that it's like philanthropy is sort of being pitted against each other. Now, these same mega donors will sometimes then make a big donation to a community college the same week or the same month. That gets almost no press. But when it goes to Harvard, that's when there's kind of this uproar. And so it is really interesting to hear your perspective.
Yeah, no, I want Harvard to be successful and I want Salem State to be successful. I think there is enough philanthropy out there for both. And I really appreciate that I think many people in, the greater community, and even in Boston, are starting to pay attention to missions like Salem State. First gen students, 40% of our students are students of color. Nearly, 40% of them are Pell eligible, which puts them in a financial situation that's often challenging to navigate college. But if not for Salem State, where would those students go? So
I love it.
I think each mission is critical to the success of our country, honestly.
I love it. And I want to talk more about Salem State in a bit here, but you made the move to Beth Israel, which is where all three Grinna boys were born. And so tell me about the move to the healthcare world. I guess it's the only time you left college, although they're tightly connected with the academic community as well. So maybe only a brief externship from college.
Yeah.
What should everybody know about moving into an environment like that relative to the higher ed sector?
Yeah, it's a teaching hospital. So I still really didn't leave college, if you will. So I was actually recruited over there from someone that left Harvard to be in a leadership position. And so I actually had a fear of hospitals, and partly why I took the job. I lost my grandfather in a hospital. So at a very sort of, I think, point in my life that it was pretty devastating. So I said, I'm going to leap in head first and see if I can get over my fear, which obviously I had to go to the hospital every single day to go to work. So I'm happy to say I've got over my fear of hospitals. I think the thing that I missed about higher ed when I went to work in the hospital environment was the positive nature in which people associate with higher ed and their experience in higher ed versus a hospital. I often find myself in conversations where I was sitting across a donor and they were sharing their story, but there was a lot of emotion that was coming through, and it wasn't always positive emotion. It was sadness. And I think as a positive person had a hard time with that. It just, for me, was really difficult. I mean, it's very important work. It's the best hospital in Boston, in my opinion, the most compassionate care. My doctor's still there. And I think they're doing exceptional work. But for me, I wanted to get back into that higher ed environment. I love the cyclical nature of higher ed. And, there's a new crop of commencement graduates every year, and that sense of pride and excitement that comes in crossing the stage. And of course, and then when you welcome the new incoming class, and that idea that you're really changing lives. Saving lives is important, don't get me wrong. But I think, at Salem State, we're educating people who are saving lives, nurses, for example.
Yeah. And talk about facing your fears. That's like being afraid of flying and becoming a flight attendant. So
yeah.
Level, but ultimately wanted to get back to campus. It sounds like had the opportunity to join Emerson College. Talk about a unique angle historically, a unique story for sure, and a different place in the Massachusetts college landscape.
Absolutely. Emerson, was one of the most creative places I think I ever worked. And I took a lot of the creativity from that and carry it forward today. But the student population is exceptionally talented and creative. And we got to do a lot of fun things.
And people are listening right now. We have listeners all over the country, some all over the world. And they're saying, what is Emerson College? But, Jay Leno went to Emerson College. More recently, Jennifer Coolidge, who has just been getting.
Not forget Henry Winkler, and also the creator of Friends and Will and Grace. So
it's basically just a media sort of entertainment powerhouse right in the Boston Common, essentially.
Absolutely. And I was lucky. I was there, I think 5.5 years. The challenge I had there, though, is I had 5 vice presidents I reported to at the president at one point. In those 5 years. So there was a lot of turnover at the top, which didn't create the stability I think I was looking for to really make change. You just get one boss acclimated to, and then they'd move on essentially. So there was a lot of transition that happened in those 5 years. I think I learned I can work for anyone, though. That was one of the takeaways I took from that is I think I could work with anyone.
I think very few people would say that, Cheryl. So that's a really interesting perspective. And yeah, I mean, for sure, change management is a battle. And I think it's a reminder that, there's kind of such a thing as Emerson College, but at a sort of team member level, it's so much more about like, who is your manager? Who is your leader? Where it's not really about, like, everybody talks about Harvard or Emerson or Salem State, but it's really like it's Cheryl and it's your direct report, and how they're engaging and inspiring the team. And I feel like that's the piece that, as sort of an outsider, is almost impossible to really understand.
Yeah. And honestly, I was really eager to do a campaign when I was there. So I even encouraged the board at the time to do a feasibility study, and it was recommended that we move forward with a campaign. But ultimately, it really never got taken, beyond that feasibility study or that desire to do it. The board really just wasn't, at the time, supportive of a campaign. In fact, when Lee Pelton was arriving as president, I helped onboard him with helping him to get to know who the donors were and such. And, I'd asked him before I ended up coming to Salem State. I said, I'll stay if you can tell me we'll be in a campaign in a couple of years, or at least, planning the feasibility study of a campaign. And he said, I can't make that commitment to you. So you should take this opportunity at Salem State to be the campaign manager for what was then 10,000 Reasons. And well, it wasn't actually 10,000 Reasons. It was just a campaign. It became 10,000 Reasons. I admire him for being honest with me in that moment, because for me, one of the pieces in my career that I had yet to have was sort of the beginning, middle, and end of a campaign. I'd been at the end of a campaign at Harvard. I'd been at the beginning of a campaign at Beth Israel. But I was really looking to be a part of, the whole thing. And so that was kind of the opportunity I was looking for next in my career. And that's where Salem State came in.
So partly the career opportunity, and then partly being in Salem, different mission, different set of objectives, different history. And so and I think it's fair to sort of say, like, the primary driver was the kind of alignment of professional opportunity. But I know that you've become just such a champion and believer in the mission.
Yes.
Immediate, or did it take some time to really?
It was pretty immediate, honestly, because I really quickly learned how similar it was to Oswego State University, being a public comprehensive university, really serving the region, and not only from a student perspective, from a job perspective, not too dissimilar to, Oswego State, where I went. So I immediately connected with the student body. I had a chance to work with some student workers early on in my campaign manager role. And just the people. I mean, it truly is a wonderful community to be a part of. And it still is the reason I get up every day excited to come to work is, it's the leadership. And that's both volunteer and President Keenan. It's the amazing team and advancement and our partners we work with on campus. Everyone is here supporting student success in a way that I've never seen at any institution I've ever been at.
There has been an 11% decline in undergraduate enrollment in Massachusetts from before the pandemic to now. How do you feel that at Salem State? How do you navigate that, recognizing that you're truly one of those inflection institutions of, do I go at all or do I not? How is that affecting you?
Enrollments everywhere are being affected. But I think we're not an institution that's sitting and watching and letting it happen. We're being strategic. We are what is called an emerging HSI, Hispanic Serving Institution. The largest growing college age population in the communities we serve is the Hispanic community. And we realize, just we're a couple percentage points away from getting that federal designation. And so we realize preparing and meeting those students wherever they come from is important in the student experience. And so we focused a lot of our time and our strategic plan on becoming a serving institution, an institution that serves students to the best of our ability. And I think that's going to differentiate us not only with the state university system, but I think in the state of Massachusetts, we want to be the best Hispanic serving institution. We'll be the second in the state of Massachusetts.
And so is there a specific goal, a specific milestone that you all are working towards to achieve that?
Certainly student persistence is what we have our eye on, is ensuring that every student has equal, access to success. And that plays out certainly in our campaign. In everything we're raising money for, it supports that, making sure our students get to graduation, because our students can't afford to come for 1 or 2 years and then leave because of a short financial milestone that they can't meet, because then they leave with further debt, further expenses, and no degree to show for it. And it just sets them and their families back even further. So we realize the enormous responsibility we have to ensure their success. And so every single thing that we're doing in the campaign is working to, have the highest percentage of student persistence we can possibly have.
Well, this is timely. We're recording on May 11th, and I had just read an article, a story that was in WBUR that featured your colleague, Nate Bryant, who leads Salem State's student success efforts. And it just struck me as being such an amazing example about the true intersection of advancement and student success. I read about this micro grant program. My understanding is $6,500 can be awarded to students that are identified as high risk of dropping out. Just tell me about the assembly line that goes into making something like that happen, because you've got to be able to understand which students are at high risk of dropping out, B, ensure that you've got that story that you can then wrap up, to C, go and find donors that want to step in and really potentially be the difference maker for those students. And then ultimately, that must just create amazing impact stories. And as somebody, describing your background, I can certainly empathize with just the cost pressures that students feel, and it's got to be incredibly rewarding when you get that right.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have to go back probably 4 years at this point when we started to think about the Viking completion grants. It came from a donor who was interested in understanding the key moments when a student, when we lose a student because of financial reasons. So in partnership with our financial aid team, we all sat in a room, a couple of people from my team, myself, and a couple of people from my financial aid, and there was someone pulling data, and it was a huge brainstorming discussion about how do we, what does the data look like? Where is it that we can capture those students who are losing at key moments? And that's when, the Viking completion grants were developed, and that concept was developed, and we had a great champion that helped us launch that in Kim Gassett Schiller and Philip Schiller, who made a $5 million gift and honestly launched the program immediately. We already have had tremendous success in the retention of those students as a result. But, you can't create moments like this. I mean, we were at the Salem State series. I was sitting next to Kim. We were listening to Big Poppy. Big Poppy is done, right? And over comes a student, unsolicited, who'd heard Kim's name because Kim sponsored the series, and said, I have to thank you. I graduate this May. It was May 6th that we were at the series last year. I graduate this May because of you. And she started crying, and Kim started crying. I mean, this wasn't even orchestrated, but this genuine moment was with this student who didn't even identify who she was, but how important it was to her and her daughter, who was going to watch her graduate in May. So it's fast forward a year later, we're launching the campaign on Saturday. We found the student and we connected her with Kim at the event, and they, had some moments to share in addition to that. So, I think to say that the impact of that program has been enormous would be an understatement, for sure.
It's so amazing. And it's such a clear example. And I contrast it with the more general ask that people get. Hey, it's May 11th. Please give to the annual fund before June 30th. I just got that yesterday from one of the institutions I'm involved with. And you contrast that with, hey, Brent, for $1,100, there's a junior single mom named Cheryl who has, 2 kids and is on the cusp of needing to drop out. Would you be willing to make a gift of $1,100? It's like such a different ask. And it's like, how do we scale that, where you, even as a, smaller donor in the context of any campaign giving pyramid, feel like you're changing a life? And I mean, that's the rub, because everybody wants unrestricted annual. But as a donor, I want to do what Mary Schiller did, even if it's at a much smaller scale. How do we figure that out?
Yeah, well, we're doing that actually. During the pandemic, there was a lot of discussion about, do we continue fundraising? And I was like, well, we can't not fundraise. Our students need us now more than ever. So we continued doing that. And we had a student emergency fund, but it was never really utilized in a way that it is used now. And, one of the things that we do is explain what, 100, 250, 500 in that fund can, make a difference for our students. And so every single donor at every level can resonate with the idea of they're changing lives, truly, in a way that they wouldn't probably be able to at other places. Because $300 could mean the difference between an A and a C, even, for books. We've heard stories where students are sharing books or having to go to the library and read books, out of the library, share the library books with other friends, because they just can't afford the books. So we try to do that, Brent, as much as we can, because we realize, that's the story that used to be where you could say it's going for technology and, that general annual giving jargon, that I think, much of the 90s and 2000s was about. I think that is gone. We need to do better. We need to do better.
And I think from a technology perspective, we have made good strides, but we need to do better too, because, how can we create and scale those, the digital versions of the authentic connection that Mary felt with that student, which of course, when you're giving at that level, is going to have all of the stewardship orchestration that you could muster. But how do we apply that philosophically and technologically so that if I were a $500 donor who actually helped the student get through school, that I kind of get that feeling too. And then I have the loop closed in a way where I know, like, it wasn't just, hypothetically your $500 could illustratively help a student that is, generally like Cheryl, but it's like, Brent, you helped Cheryl, and Cheryl wants to let you know that she really appreciates it. That's obviously, we're doing a lot of work in that regard, but there's so much more.
Those personalized videos, there's,
personalized, but doing so in a way like, yes, the technology is there, but how do we make it even simpler, nearly frictionless, so that as a, small team or a big team, you can do that hundreds or thousands of times without having to do all of the high touch coordination that maybe is going to be reserved for the very top of the pyramid. So you just launched Meet the Moment, $75 million campaign, lots of positive press this week, and really, I'm sure, a reflection of years, maybe, I know for you, a decade plus of work. But when you think about Salem State 2030, for example, what do you hope you're able to say after this campaign?
That we've transformed the way in which we serve students at the institution. We've always been really good at serving students well, but the efficiencies as well as the financial supports, and so that every student who wants a degree, regardless of their financial ability, can get it. That is, I think, where we need to meet the moment. And if we're successful, this campaign will get us there.
And that is a message that can resonate with direct members of the Salem State community, alumni, et cetera. But you also, I imagine, have corporate partners that want more alignment with skills and talent pipeline. And then you've got general philanthropists who might believe in the first gen experience or want to support a Hispanic serving institution. And so in a certain regard, almost anybody could get inspired by the Salem State mission. But if you start saying, well, our prospect pool is anybody, you're going to quickly become overwhelmed. And so how do you balance like broadening the donor base without just chasing every possible person that, has given to related causes?
I always say that the Salem State mission can resonate with anyone pretty much. It's interesting. A lot of it is referrals. So, or we've had a wonderful outcome of some PR from some big ifs that have brought in donors that have never been associated with the institution because they see the impact of those larger gifts. And in a sense, it's social proofing, right? If the Cummings Foundation supported the institution with a $10 million gift, then there must be doing something over there at Salem State, right? So we've had a few inbound calls as a result of some of those larger gifts, but I think the community around us understands the value of having Salem State in the community. But certainly, we're starting to extend into Boston, and some of the large businesses in Boston are supporting us, seeing the value that we have from a pipeline perspective. And certainly, hospitals in terms of our nursing program. So, it can be overwhelming, to be honest. But I think we have a wonderful opportunity of telling the Salem State story and hopefully doing it in a way that inspires and brings in new people. But I always say the best thing we can do is create the best donor experience, because people talk about their experience when they give to other people. And that we're seeing almost like a snowball effect in the way in which we want our donors to feel a part of the community, understand the impact, and value the relationship with us. And leave feeling like, gosh, that was the best experience I've ever had giving. I want to do it again.
I love
And
that.
so I think word of mouth is our best ally right now, as well as obviously some intentional outreach that's being done, with the frontline team, but certainly creating the best donor experience possible.
Love that. I do just want to ask, I've been getting some fun stories. You've been doing this for a long time, a lot of visits, trips, conversations. Anything on the blooper reel you're willing to share? Trips gone wrong, asks that were way out of whack? I mean, any stories that will maybe create some common ground with our listeners? Yeah.
It's interesting. We've kind of changed the way in which we talk with donors. With this campaign about 5 years ago, we did some training as a team, and so we've changed our approach. But I'll talk about when I was asking for gifts, right? Like just asking for a dollar amount. It was, we knew this person was well connected. We knew they had a lot of care for the institution and that they'd given significant amount of money over a period of time. And so, we went in with a very bold ask. And I think the person, we asked for $1 million, and the person, I think, was surprised that we asked for such a large gift, but at the same time, was, I don't want to say like tickled to death, like that we thought that they had the ability to do something like that. But I'll never forget it. And luckily that person stuck with us. But it was sort of that moment where I realized, projecting a number onto an individual didn't feel right. But it was sort of like all I knew. We approach it entirely different now. Entirely.
It's so tricky because to the donor, you literally, I'm just going to say, you could have walked in and been asking for 50, 500, 5 million. And to both you and the donor, there's really no way to calibrate around that with the limited information at your disposal. They didn't know what they were walking into. You didn't know what you were walking into. And how do you, there's a counter argument which is aim high, and maybe, you can land in a spot that would have been, that's the negotiating anchoring strategy. We asked for $1 million. There's no possible way they're going to do it. But now whatever they might have imagined they could stretch to, maybe that gets lifted. But it sounds like you've changed the philosophy. So how do you think about calibrating now to make sure that you're not wildly under asking or over asking?
So we say we don't ask. We facilitate conversation that leads to the right amount. So we lead with, how do you want to make a difference? And then kind of walk them through a path of how that could look. Do you want to change one student's life? Do you want to change many students' lives? Do you want this to be a lasting gift? Do you want to make an immediate impact? We start with those key questions that then further facilitate larger gifts. But starting with how they want to make a difference certainly is the right place to start. Whereas we would just go in with what we thought they would want to give to based on their interests. So a no assumptions approach, I guess. And, through, much like you would with your doctor, right? Confirming what they say, going, finding information, facilitating conversations with people on campus that are experts. We always say those are the best moments, when you can get a donor and someone who is really passionate on campus about the priority we're raising money for, talking. It sort of sells itself, and they want to make the deepest impact they can make, walking away from those conversations. So it's a lot different than, I think, the way in which we approached our work five years ago.
Thank you for sharing. I'm sure that will be very relatable to many of our listeners. I did have a full-on, the closest story that I've had like that was from one of our early teammates at Evertrue, Jim Zimmerman, who worked at Middlesex School for many years in Concord. And he shared a spit out the wine, almost heart attack level moment where he wildly over asked relative to what the donor was expecting, which I'll never forget.
Yeah.
Tell me about where you are with the campaign, and if you're hiring, and if folks want to learn more about opportunities at Salem State or just connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
So we, on Saturday, launched the largest campaign in state university history, $75 million. The good news is we had voted to go into a $50 million campaign in 2020, February 2020, just before the pandemic. And so to be 3 years later in a position where we had to really reevaluate what the goal was ambitious enough for the needs on campus. And luckily we had a lot of donor support, having just raised 40 million. Toward the 50, we made a decision to raise the campaign goal to 75 million before going public on Saturday. So very proud of my team and the work that they did kind of leading up to that. But we're excited. We're out publicly now with Meet the Moment. And had a wonderful celebration on Saturday and rolled out a whole communication plan, website, the whole nine. But, we've got work to do. We've got 35 more million to raise. And I think I'm excited about what the next 2 to 3 years looks like and getting that goal.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for sharing your journey, Cheryl, and for giving everybody more of a window into your world and the mission at Salem State. And we really appreciate the longstanding collaborations that we've had. And this makes me even more excited for the responsibility that we have in working to elevate the donor experience and hopefully making it a lot.
Oh, and you asked if we have any jobs. We don't.
Yeah. Tell me about the jobs.
We don't have any jobs. They're all filled. And
Yeah.
luckily we're retaining people. So
this is unheard of. I've done 100 and I don't know 50 plus of these episodes, and I've never heard that sentence. So well done, congratulations, and
thank you.
that means everybody should pay even more attention to opportunities there.
Yes, you never know, but right now I'm happy to say we don't have any positions posted, which is exciting.
Well, congrats on that. Best wishes for that to continue. And thank you. And I'd encourage everybody to reach out to Cheryl on LinkedIn, let her know that you heard about this. And with that, we can wrap up. Cheryl, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Brent.
All right, Brent, signing off with today's guest, Cheryl Webster Crounse from Salem State University. Take care, everybody.